This is Mirador Television. Who the hell is Mirador Television? Well, take a look at this. Now, you wonder what it's like to get up early to come and do a broadcast, which I do 5 days of the week, sometimes 6. This morning, because it's budget day, and I thought, well, I better put a tie on and so on and so forth, because if I'm going to mix with the great and the good a little later in the day, I better dress properly for it. So I looked for a shirt. Couldn't find one that I hadn't ironed, or I had ironed. But I did find one hanging up in the closet. Oh, good, I thought. Right. So then I took the shirt and I discovered it was one of those that has cufflinks, right? Where are the cufflinks? Now we have to find the cufflinks, right? We get the cufflinks, then we have to find the eyes, these little slots that they go into. Can we find them? No, we can't. The shirt's all over the place. So then we have to smooth the shirt out. Then we go and find our trousers for the suit. Right? Oh, trousers, the suit, okay, braces. But the belt isn't there. The belt is in the trousers that I wore yesterday. So we have to go and find the trousers that I wore yesterday, take out the belt, and go and put them in the trousers that I'm going to wear today. But I start off and I get it upside down, inside out, and back to front. So I have to start all over again. By that time, I've lost one of my socks. So I'm going to have to wear odd socks or go on a hunt. I don't have time anymore to go for a hunt. So I'm wearing odd socks. So thank God you can't see any more from down here. This is the only bit you can see for the moment anyway, because believe me, getting ready to come over here in the morning is not the easiest thing. And, some people might say I'm an idiot. Well, then I am met with a text from somebody I know who says, you are an idiot. Who reads Wind in the Willows nowadays? I'm weird for reading Wind in the Willows. So that's another good start to the day. And then I get in here, and what happens is that my good friend and colleague Paul, who is there, says, Keith, I've got an idiot's guide to the budget. I'm looking for an idiot. And he looked at me.
Morning, Paul. Keith, that's the most pathetic excuse for looking as you do. That story. I could have got the pie, actually. By the way, the fact
I've got the pie, yes. I don't suppose they'd let me in the House of Commons if I continue to wear the hat, but... Okay, it's budget day.
Yeah, okay. The fact I've got a blue shirt on is neither here nor there. It's a nice shirt. It's my city shirt, so we're both in good frame of mind. Anyway, how are you, Keith?
I'm fine. And just before we get on to budget, I think that one of the things that really bothers me about local government and actually government altogether, and I keep on recalling the fact that Boris said that we need a root and branch reform, and we do. About 3 months ago, we reported through Stephen Catlin, who is our watchdog on local government, that the LDC, the Lewis District Council, had not paid the inland revenue, the tax due on two charities that it handles. One, it's called the Stanley Ground, where they play cricket, and another one. The two names I can't remember at the moment, but they are two leisure grounds where people pay sports and so on and so forth. And as a charity, they have to file tax with the Charity Commission. Well, they made all sorts of excuses about reorganization and so on and so forth, which Stephen and we, this television station, accepted as being legitimate and reasonable. As of yesterday, still no filing. So it makes you wonder how much they fob us off with their excuses as to why they don't do anything. Is it time that we actually got a different form of government? Well, that's a question which we can consider, and we will consider tomorrow after we've heard what the Chancellor has to say about the budget today. So, Paul, first things first, Idiot's Guide. What is the key thing that everybody should watch for today?
There's no key thing, because it's a young Chancellor, Keith, who's it must be intimidating for Rishi Sunak, but he's a very smart guy. He's got to present a budget which is going to displease many people, but it's necessary. But it's what's interesting is the ex-Chancellor Philip Hammond said he has to tell home truths. In other words, you can't fob the public off. You've got to give how I see the budget going is that you always start with bad news in the budget. You say what the situation is. You say, well, we're doing our best. And at the end, you give good news, Keith. That's how it patterns out. And most public like that. The one thing I was going to say to everybody who finds the budget intimidating, don't. As Margaret Thatcher said, look at your household. It's the same elements and the same situations and financial problems in a house as with the government. All it is, the government, is a fanciful way of actually running a massive budget, which we're giving them, and we've every right to question the use of it, Keith. So that's the idiot's guide in some ways. But generally, he's got to find a balance, Keith. He's going to give bad news, which I think most people, if they're given the bad news, can take it. If you lie to the public on the budget, you get found out, Keith. So Boris has made a massive statement, root and branch is right, but the question the public ask is, can this government do that?
Yeah, well, so can anybody do it? I mean, what I've discovered is that those people who are well set, and actually I was looking yesterday, because I am a bit of an idiot when it comes to these things, and I'm glad to have you at my side to go through them. But I was looking yesterday at who the government has helped and who they haven't through this COVID thing. Yeah. And the funny thing is, what strikes me is that they've helped everybody who had a job anyway, and they've ignored totally those people who kept going. Who are suffering because we tried to provide a service and so on. Now, if that's not topsy-turvy government, I don't know what is. To be quite honest with you, I think there is going to be a price to pay. How long is it till the next general election? We've got another 2 years, haven't we, before we hit perhaps even 3. And he's lucky because he's got a big majority. And I'm not an anti-Boris man at all, but I just think that you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head, is that this government has got to decide what it's going to do, and fudging isn't any good anymore, because they are upsetting their natural supporters, and we're gathering. I said to somebody yesterday, perhaps it was you, there are 3 million people, 3 million businesses in this country who are in the same situation as us. We don't qualify for anything, but we kept going. Like the Windmill Theatre in London during the war. We never closed. And who have they rewarded? Not us. And there are 3 million. And whoever I was talking to said, Keith, 3 million, it's closer to 12 million. Now, that's a good chunk of voters. And if they're not careful, they're going to upset those voters. They better start to do a massage job. But do you know something? The thing that worries me is I don't think whether we're talking about high or low. I don't think that whether we're talking about the people in Westminster or whether we're actually talking about the people down the road in Southover, is they don't know. And as our good friend Graham Adicott, a first-class journalist, says, because we do a lot of training together, is they don't know what they don't know. And that's the terrifying thing, is when you don't even know what the ball game is all about. It doesn't matter whether you know the rules or not. But anyway, that's my little rant for the morning. And before you go into point number 2 and get cracking, is just let me tell everybody that we've got sunny intervals and a gentle breeze today. It's going to go up to 11 degrees. 3 degrees the low, a lovely sunny period from about 10 o'clock through till late afternoon. And then the temperature is going to plummet. And by Friday, I'm afraid, the low in the evening is going to be 1 degree. So there we are. We've done our duty. Now, Paul, back to you. Right. And, when you look at me and you think, right, I've got to do the idiot's guide, and here's my favorite idiot. I personally am beginning to take the view that the people in Westminster are more idiotic than I am. So that's hard to take. Right, carry on.
Could I plead the Fifth Amendment on that?
You can indeed. You don't have to join my revolution, but it's there. It's coming.
Keith, when I was at uni and doing economics, one of my friends made a very pithy but good comment about what the budget is. It's a situation where the government report yearly how they've screwed up and how they intend to sort it out, but next year they're still trying to sort it out. So it goes with every government that they're on a damned if you do and damned if you don't. As coronavirus was to Boris, this is to Rishi, because it's the same thing. He's up against it. This is new territory for all of us, Keith. So in a way, it's the blind leading the blind. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what they've got to do, I've got some notes here. There's 3 main objectives. I've worked hard on this to give the public, 3 main objectives, 3 only. Tackle the end of COVID period of the economy. 2, fix the public finances. 3, secure a recovery. That's his remit from Boris, and that's a remit of any chancellor in the current situation. If he gets that right, fine. What they've got to do is, I agree with Philip Hammond, tell some home truths to the public. This sector is in trouble. We've probably given too much money to, you could argue they had to give a lot of money to NHS. How much excess have they given? There's lots of inquiries to come, but actually we're starting from ground zero now, Keith, and they can get it right. If he says root and branch, let's see what's happened in a year or 2. Yeah. It's all very well.
Your assessment, I think, is absolutely spot on, Paul, and I'll ask you to carry on with that in a minute. But one of the things that always frightens me is politicians never make a mistake, ever. Anybody in politics or in governance never makes a mistake, never, ever. The rest of us, we can make 1,000 mistakes. And if I may say so, those people who, whether it's from finance or whether it's from governance or whatever, don't hesitate to point it out. I get sick and tired of things being sent back simply because you didn't put a bracket after, or subsection 2 said you should put a tick against this. It's absolute rubbish. It's absolute nonsense. While I think, as you say, ground zero, they can get it right. All right, you said that you'll plead the Fifth Amendment, but let me ask you this. What are the odds, in your view, that they will get it right?
Whether it be Labour, Liberal, Communist, whatever, they should give the public a timeline, Keith. What's interesting, it's not lockdown. We would give them lots of different lockdown periods, kept us going, dragged us through. What's his name? Rishi Sunak should give us a timeline. He can do that much. He clearly can't have a crystal ball. He's been thrown at the deep end. But there's a chance. There's a chance of building a new economy as we get people coming with you. The problem is, Keith, is as we said, people will spend nothing. Let that happen. But what I'd like to see, statistics often lie. I'd like to see exactly how the government's expenditure has been during the COVID period, because we don't clearly, they're like France, like Germany, like everybody, money's been thrown at the NHS, thrown at because schools, etc., which in a way is quick fix and quite right. But I'd like to know how much of the budget today will actually give us some figures that could be interesting.
Paul, we're beginning to suffer. What we suffered yesterday is you're beginning to break up. Yeah, you're beginning to break up.
Can you hear me now?
Just about there. Yeah.
Okay. Was I too near? Sorry, is that okay?
Well, perhaps that's the problem. If you're just about there, we seem to be able to hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Sorry about that. It seems fine. Yeah. So basically, Keith, it is the blind leading the blind today, because I don't think they've got no government in this situation would have a clear-cut policy. Really, they're going to have to play it by ear. But I'd like to hear the figures today, Keith. They're going to be quite telling. If people have a go at the government for maybe giving the NHS too much, I think that's a bit churlish. But the government can't be selective. They should try and distribute the finances fairly. And I don't think they've done that, Keith. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's the old thing, isn't it? Is that you give somebody. I mean, I remember. I won't mention which big firm, but I consulted on communications for a very, very big company, a British company, and all the branch managers were busy trying to spend their budget at the end of the year. Because if they didn't spend it, so they spent it on absolute rubbish because they hadn't spent it, but they wouldn't get the same budget the next year, which seems to me to be remarkably silly, because that's when things go haywire.
Yeah, I've got a similar story, Keith. When I was in banking, I got called up in front of the finance director of a certain bank. I won't mention it. I was quite senior then. He said, "We've got £1 million to spend." I said, "Yes. Why can't we carry it forward to the next budget?" No. I've got to get rid of this money because, and that goes on. That is a very stupid thing. Just to make the figures look good, Keith. It's absolutely nonsense. But I was yeah. But that's ridiculous. I was just comparing this with Churchill, because you could argue, and I've heard it argued quite rightly, it's a war budget. The war that Churchill's budget was obviously had to be for the war, and I think, Keith, we're in a similar stage. This is a war budget where we've taken on a virus. Now, we've done very well to get everything, vaccine, etc. Now the ruins of finances must now be dealt with like the Germans did, if you like. It's really all of us working together to actually build a new economy which is fairer, leaner, where politicians are more answerable. It's actually our chance to do it, Keith. If we don't take it, we'll just go back to the old days. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Right. Yeah. I mean, can I ask you this, Paul? Because you and I have discussed this before. Is that we're sitting on a tinderbox at the moment. There's a lot of dissatisfaction, and we don't know how that may erupt. It may erupt in a nice civil revolution, or it just might erupt into violence. Now, let me ask you this. If the government award any sort of pay rise or bonus or whatever to MPs, do you think that could be the match that would light great dissatisfaction across the country?
I would think so, Keith. And if they do make that mistake, they deserve the whirlwind. I mean, that's similar to America, where just something like that would set it off. I don't think we're as riot conscious as Americans are, but I think some people at the end of their tether, you can see it in the streets. All people want is to be, it's rather like, I suppose, Moses in the desert. They want to know that they're going to get through the desert and get to the place that Moses has said. And that's what a prime minister has to do. If Moses can do it, we can do it. So it's really the government has to. Keith, if you're a leader, if you're a captain in the army in the war, you're not going to give you're going through the war. You're going to give optimistic news, etc. So what the government has to do is, yes, tell us home truths, but obviously show us a pathway where we're going. Otherwise, the public will say, "Well, hold it. This government knows as much as we do." So we should beat them on the beaches. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's got to be a timeline. You've got to say, in 6 months' time, we hope to be there, because governments should be judged on results. Often they don't have to explain things, do they? No. So I think. Yeah, see, I worked
with Dow Jones when I was working for CNBC.
Yeah.
I was liaison journalist, if you like, between the two organizations. And Dow Jones had something which, and I assume they still do, called an enterprise story. And an enterprise story is where you took a tiny little scrap of information and you built it into a story, as opposed to the usual thing where you got a story off the wire and you dissolved it down to manageable proportions. And I wonder whether when this all started, it was almost jolly good fun. I can remember it. I grew a beard, if you recall, and I did my broadcasts from the garden, and it was all there's this lockdown,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, we did it for two months
Yeah.
and so on. And what did the MPs do? But immediately vote themselves £10,000. I think it was. It was more than that actually. I think it was £13,000 for some odd figure. They gave themselves £13,000. I don't think that they would do it now. And perhaps
No.
what I'm seeing is an enterprise story, if you like, is that what they did a year ago is not appropriate now. And that's how our society is beginning to change. That where we were throwing cash around and nobody got terribly excited 12 months ago, is that 12 months on, we are much more aware of what's going on in our society, and that there are certain things which have simply got to change. Otherwise, they're going to be problems. How was that for the idiot?
Pretty good, Keith. You phrased it there, but no, I agree with that totally. We're all in the same boat. It's just that hopefully we'd be rowing in the same way as the government. Really,
absolutely, yeah.
He's got to sum up in an hour and a half. I think it's an hour and a half, isn't it? The budget. It's going to be tough, but if he gets the main points over, the public can wait a bit longer, Keith. But think about it. We've gone through a year and a bit of lockdowns. We've not had much fun. We've not had much social life. We all miss drinking, etc. We know that. But they've got to we've done our hard porridge, if you like, in prison. It's now time. Yeah. Hey, I know it's bad news you've got, but can you tell us some good news? And can you tell us how you plan to get us out of this mess?
I think partisan politics has got to go by the board too. I can remember that in 1975, which was my first year in Northern Ireland with the BBC, and one of the first jobs that we had was analysing a budget, and I think it was Dennis Healy's budget, and he made the very dangerous statement, if I may use that word. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but he more or less said, all those people who are earning £4,000 a year are wealthy people, and we are going to squeeze them until we make the pips squeak. Now, three-quarters of the country were on under or about £4,000. I mean, it was a silly thing to do for a man who I thought was actually not a bad chancellor, all in all. Can you anticipate that we're going to see silly stuff in a parliamentary debate today like that?
Well, actually, the modern, I think there was a lot more seriousness in those days, Keith. I mean, I thought the budget that Lawson did, some of the budgets that the Labour chancellors did, was good. How can I put it? I think the current government's got a bit laissez-faire. It should. The government's supposed to lead, aren't they? Whereas we're trying to second guess them. So how about explaining in simple words? And I think this guy, he's a smart guy. Rishi, he's a very smart guy. So if he can give something that we can all hold on to, it doesn't have to be. It can say, look, how I would put it if I was Chancellor is, look, we've gone through a tough time. There's going to be a bit more because the economy is in a bad state, but this is how we're going to proceed. And it's not giving secrets away. Just tell the public the truth. Just say, in a year's time, we expect to be there. This is going to happen. The trouble they've got, Keith, is selectivity, because it's a tough one, isn't it? The government, you have to select what you give the money to, and there are lots of sectors that have been ignored. That's going to be a problem. So there's half the country's happy, and half the country aren't happy, and that's what he's got to fix that.
Do you know something that you said there that is bothering me as well? You said he's a smart guy. And I think that's absolutely right. We've got a lot of clever people, but even in this very small operation, Mirador Television, I've had a lot of very clever people. No doubt that when it came to skill and ability, they would outreach me by far. but they had no experience, and they didn't want to accept that they had no experience. And as a consequence, the decisions they made were so far wide of the mark of what was needed that it left you gasping, thinking, "Are they stupid?" No, they're not stupid, and he's not stupid. But is he so out of touch with everyday people? Because I don't notice that the government, even with its MPs scattered around the country, I don't notice that it tries to find out how the rest of us are living. They use the famous term that at Westminster they live in a bubble. And having, little as a journalist, I've been in and out of Westminster. I've dealt a lot with cabinet ministers and so on. The fact is, they do. They live in a bubble. If they don't get out of that bubble and start to see what their constituents are all about, we've got a problem. Right now, Paul, I'm going to give us a little break because people are undoubtedly fed up of listening to us. It's 7:56, so let's just take a look at one or two things that help pay the bills. Actually, they don't at the moment, but nonetheless, we'll keep fighting on, and we'll come back, and you can continue with your chapter and verse, because, as you said, you've done a lot of thinking about it, you've done a lot of digging, you've got a lot of information, and I think that with your feeling for what's going to happen today I'd like to hear more, and I'm sure people who are watching would like to hear more. So we'll be back in a second.
Okay.
When you've missed the train, don't despair. Have a nice cup of coffee. And perhaps a mince pie. At the runaway on Lewis Station. After that, why worry about the next train? The runaway on Lewis Station. Relaxation beyond compare.
Now, Paul, interestingly, we have some comments from people on screen. Good morning, John Kessels, who says MPs are set for a £3,500 pay rise next month, unless it's suspended today. What's your thank you, John, for because you made a couple of other comments which I'll get to in a moment, which are very helpful. I wasn't aware of that, Paul, because I don't watch MPs pay.
John Kessels is my friend. John Kessels is my friend, Keith.
Right.
New Zealand.
Well done, John. Well done, your friend.
Well, that's good. No, he's made a fair point. John, obviously, New Zealand has a similar setup to us. But yeah, John's right. There is, I think we talked about this, and taking John's point, is there's a disconnect, Keith, between most of the electorate and the government, and most of the electorate and their council. So what we're saying, I think the point, that the magic word bureaucracy comes up. What is stifling this country is bureaucracy. Simple as that. But it keeps people employed. You know, so you think of how much we could, if in online and technology helps to a certain extent, it can also obfuscate things. But I think that's it, that bureaucracy should be streamlined. People should understand it, because there's lots of people being left out of normal society. Surely a society is only good if it's inclusive of everybody. And this country and other countries are not looking after some sections or some industries. So it's got to be a fair budget, but I don't know what money he's got to use. We'll see this afternoon when the figures come out.
Well, one of the things that does bother me is, and John has put his finger on it, is that the MP's pay is suggested by an independent parliamentary standards authority run by MPs. Now, if you sit on a committee or authority or whatever, and you're talking about your own and your mate's pay rise, what are you going to do? Are you going to say zero this year, and then sit next to them in the Houses of Parliament? It is very well made. And then he's made another final point. Rishi could ask his wife for a few billion. She's richer than the Queen, although she needed 100,000 a government paid her through furlough. And we, that tiny little television operation tucked away in the county town of East Sussex, broadcasting to the world, can't get a penny, not a penny. You talk about bureaucracy. You know, we've been going backwards and forwards with the local council. I'm glad that I'm keeping the emails, because I can publish them one day. And what it's all about is we must be very careful with the taxpayers' money. We've got to refine this. You know, I mean, how many times can you refine a grant? How many times can you refine a loan? I mean, it's absolutely outrageous what's happening. But these are things that people don't see, and I think these are the things that we. It's incumbent upon us to pick on some of these little things while we're talking about the wider picture. But thank you, John Kessels. Do join us anytime you want, and very astute comments. Paul, let's get back to your three-stage plan, not three-stage assessment. What's next on your agenda?
Well, just quickly to take John's point, because I know John very well. He's absolutely right. He married a billionaire's daughter. Rishi, he's worth 3.8 billion. So I don't know whether you'll get the far left saying, "Well, this is terrible," etc. You've got a chancellor that's it's like a hobby to him to some extent. But it's the same old thing, Keith. Just because he's wealthy, it doesn't mean to say he's not a bad politician. Yeah. So that's the point. John's point is very valid. That's a lot of money he's going to inherit. Anyway, and sorry, go on.
I set out my stall some time ago. I'm looking for a lady in my life who's got to be wealthy, gorgeous, but also make a decent bacon sarnie. And there is nothing political or ethnic in that. It's just that I like bacon sarnies. And if they can't make it, they're out. And I've found several ladies, lovely ladies, who can qualify on 2 of the 3 points, but I haven't found one that's got all 3. So if anybody wants to send in their ballot paper, here I am. When I've got my hair cut, or had my hair cut, I'm not a bad-looking sort of chap, but for the moment, you have to take me as I am. Right, Paul. Now, it's good to have a little bit of light relief, but of course, we are talking about very serious things.
That's right.
And I'm quite sure that in your what you were looking at overnight, and that you got on the stocks for us this morning and this afternoon, because we will be showing the budget. We will be starting some live coverage at 12:30, where you'll have Paul and I making comment, and then we'll go through to when the Chancellor gets on his feet and declares his budget. But the one thing, of course, is they've been splashing the cash, and as you say, it's got to be fair as to how they get it back. Where do you think that they're going to target in trying? Because there are lots of rumours around where he's going to target, and of course those are either deliberately given to the media or from lobby correspondents or whatever. Where do you think that he's going to target? Who is going to actually pay the bill?
Well, in this new society, Keith, he's the major corporates who employ most people. You could play with corporation tax. You could. I think who's going to be the targets is what we're saying. Unfortunately, massive corporates who could pay a lot more money are, of course, in bed with governments because that's how it works, Keith. So easy targets would be you don't want to shut shops down, but then they're easy targets because that's quite easy to do. So do you introduce a new tax, which is fair all round? The thing is, what I'm trying to put over to people is you can't, until we hear what he says, we can't say anything because I'd like to look at the figures. If they've spent X, it means there's not enough money for Y. Okay, so if he once he has to tell the true figures, we can then analyse and say, okay, corporation tax has gone up. Other taxes have been looked at. We're also going to penalise people who do this. I think he's not going to be precise in this budget, Keith. He's going to give certain ideas. He'll have to give us some actual examples of what he's going to do, and he's got to give a timeline because actually timeline is more important than most. How long will it take to get this economy right? Anybody's guess. But if he starts on the right track and he gets the public with him, I think, you made a very good point, as John did, that the public are cynical about governments and councils, it seems to me. And either it's a communication problem or they just don't trust them. I suspect it could be a mixture of both. So as I say, you and I are commentating on the budget this afternoon. Until we get the figures and what he progresses, we can then square the circle. Because at the moment, all we know is that it's a unique war-type budget. And I wonder actually if the government have a clue about where they're going to go, because he's brought it forward clearly to get the public well informed. So it's a tough one, Keith. As I say, figures tell everything and nothing is the old saying. Okay, so
yes.
So until
Paul,
yeah,
Paul, if I may, I slightly differ with you on this argument because a whole generation don't remember pre-Thatcher. All they know is Margaret Thatcher was dreadful. Blah, 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 blah. You hear it all the time. But before Margaret Thatcher came to power, the top rate of income tax for some was 80%. Now, it's all very well to say the Thatcher era was awful and so on and so forth, but she brought taxes right down, more or less, to where they are now over a period of a couple of years or so, and managed the budget fairly well. But could you imagine to anybody today being told we're going to go back to 80% income tax? Because that would solve the problem straight away, wouldn't it?
It would. It would. And cause riots. That would cause riots, Keith.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that really bothers me is
can they come in on what you said? Your excellent point you've made. The thing about Thatcher is people now realise she told it as it was, and sometimes it was good news, sometimes it was bad news. I'm worried that all modern governments seem to be a bit slippery about this. They only tell us what they feel we should know. So Thatcher was, I thought, a luminary. Whether you're Labour, whatever, she was decisive, and she told people the blueprint, and we knew where we stood, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Well, I
singling her out, but
I wouldn't have wanted to be married to her. Luckily, I understand her bacon sarnies were lousy. But I mean, these are the questions that people don't ask themselves. All right, this government could go back to pre-Thatcher era and say huge income tax. Have you heard the word income tax in any debate at the moment?
No. That's right. Yeah, I think they're saving that one for later, Keith. As I say, I think they'll start. Rishi will. I think what he'll do, and he's clearly, like all chancellors do, is he'll set the scene. He'll then give some bad news, or he'll give news about coronavirus, how bad it is, we had to spend so much money, etc. Then he'll move on to various other key things like income tax. And then at the end, he'll end up with some good news and hopefully a pathway to paradise. That's how budgets normally go.
Now, having your friend John Kessel's here this morning is like having an analyst helping us as we go along. He's sending stuff through at a great rate of knots, but it's all good stuff. The Ipsos structure is made up of one former MP, and appointees made by the Speaker of the House, includes accountant and a judge. So sort of independent. But you know, I certainly would. You'd have to look very carefully at the accountant. You know, I mean, whenever you go to an accountant, lovely people though they are, you have to count your fingers before when you leave. But he makes another good point here. The government borrowing for this financial year has now reached 270.6 billion. Which is 222 billion more than a year ago. Now, in some ways, you were saying when we started off this show is forget the noughts.
Well, that's I know John so well. He's got some very good facts out, and I don't disagree with those. But as I say, if you look at every government's budget at the moment, Germany, France, they've done the same thing. So you can't really criticise them for that. But John is absolutely right. They've got to explain. I think we've got to explain what they've spent it on and how future spending is going to happen. So John makes very good points. He's very good at stats. So I agree with that. And as I say, this afternoon we'll just have to. You and I will have to commentate on this budget. But I think he's gonna. It's going to be a fair budget, but he's not going to square the circle, and that's where John's figures comes in, because that's an awful lot of money. It is an awful lot of money. But then you could, as I say, it is a war budget. I've heard that term used many times. It is an austerity and war budget. Trouble is, in Churchill's day, and then even I probably remember that, in Churchill's day, the public would all galvanise and fight the good fight together. But in the more greedy days of modern consumers, they don't want to sacrifice so much. So whereas a war budget in those days was a war budget where you're actually at war, the coronavirus is, it's over now, we can spend and we should get much more money. It doesn't work that way. This could take 2 to 3 years to iron out. But I'd like to hear what he says. I don't care who you are. You could be the best genius in the world. No one's going to predict what he says at the moment, because only he knows. So John's figures.
John obviously agrees with us. He said the billionaires wouldn't like an 80% tax increase, so we're not likely to go back there. But in fairness, the higher the tax, of course, your wealthy people then leave the country. And when they leave the country, they take their wealth with them. And so you find that that's a knock-on effect. So I don't think that they're stupid enough to do that. But as John says, the people with loads and loads and loads of money aren't going to like an 80% tax. Although Sweden seems to have got away with it.
Yes, that's right.
Right, Paul. Now we keep interrupting you, and in fact, this has been such a jolly gallop this morning through preparing ourselves for any shocks this afternoon, that it's now 8:14, and we do have to do one or two other little things. But I would, I keep on interrupting you. Would you like to go on to your next point?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to what I said at one of our previous discussions, Keith. The types of budgets. This is interesting. This applies to every budget, but they should listen to this. Austerity. You could have an austerity budget, yes, which public don't like, but with an end game. And what I mean is that this is where Philip Hammond's comment about we should tell the public home truths. The public should have some home truths. If they get a few home truths from the government, they'll believe the government more easily, correct? More credible. So you get an austerity government with a interim measure of how we're going to sort it out and an end game and a timeline. That's standard. The other one, which I think some parties will choose, is what I call the middle of the road, the neutral budget. A neutral or middle of the road budget is when it's very not so much stormy waters. That's not possible here, Keith. And the other one is supportive, good news in context. It's all going to be fine, etc. Well, I don't think they're going to say that. But in the previous times, there have been budgets that cover all those three notes: austerity, middle of the road, and supportive. It's going to be fine, guys. The public won't be duped this time, Keith. They want to see exactly where their money's going and how long this will take to sort out. It's as simple as that. Forget all the figures, the statistics. It's about real life, real households, and what they believe and what confidence have in the government. At the moment, the confidence in the government isn't very high. So he's got to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Mm. We haven't touched on inflation because we've had almost a stagnant inflationary economy for quite some time. That in itself isn't necessarily a good thing. But what I notice is, for instance, I go down to my local supermarket, which is one of the posh ones, and I go there because it takes me 2 minutes to get there. So I tend to pay a higher price. But what I've noticed is that you see a packet of Chalky Bix at £1 one day, and you'll go in, and the next day it's £1.50. And there is no suggestion from them that they had it on a special price the day before, just £1.50. Now, I mean, that is inflationary, to say the least. And I've also noticed in this particular supermarket is that they had a packet of ham, a processed ham for £1. That's gone off the shelves. The next, the cheapest you can now get is £1.85 or something of the sort. Now, all those things to me, as my understanding, not being an economist, just a good old thick journo, a good old thick hack who just reports and doesn't get involved, but really is the way that we measure inflation is through a basket of goods, and this must be playing havoc with anybody who's trying to assess what the inflationary pressures are going to be or are.
Yes, you can understand why stores and big companies are putting prices up, Keith, to some extent. That's the 50% increase is ridiculous. How does the government actually curb that? Inflation is going to be a problem, that's for sure. And if the government, you can artificialize an inflation, you can play with the figures and that. But I think that that's going to be a key thing. The best test of an economy is, as you say, the goods in the basket that somebody takes out from the store, Keith. And if each one is 20 to 50% higher, and you've already been through a year and a half of deprivation, you're not going to be very happy. In other words, the goods are high. Many people will be put on the breadline, I'm sure. And then we're back to the government giving money to the services who will help those people. So it's a circle, Keith. There's going to be a lot of people on the fringe, and sadly, higher unemployment will come along. And again, he's got to talk about higher unemployment. He's got to tell the truth and say this is what I think any chancellor do should simply look at the key facts, which we've done, and say this is what I'm going to do. It's not rocket science, is it? Okay, I'm going to make sure that Thatcher used to say that I want the pound in your pocket to be worth more. Simple things like that. But I don't think this government or any of the modern governments actually tell us the whole truth. I think it's camouflage. So I want to hear what he says today, because if his ex-colleague Hammond says, I think we should, the home truths are what the public want to hear. Don't you have more respect if somebody tells you a home truth rather than, it's a 2-year timeline, I think, and inflation will be kept, and then it all goes kaput, Keith. So it's about telling the public what's happening and how they're going to sort it out. Those 3 points to me, as I say, to John's statistics will back this up, is sort out the end of COVID economy, fix the public finances, and secure a recovery. That's simple, and that's what everybody understands, and that's the basics. And basics, back to basics is what we should be doing.
Yeah. All right, back to basics. As I said, right at the bottom of my street, and I go there because I'm a lazy bugger, and popping down the street is I hate shopping to begin with, but I could go another half a mile, and I would get at least 30% off my grocery bill, but I don't. And when I go down to this posh store, I see great queues of people waiting to get there. Do you think that there are going to be any winners and losers amongst the big food suppliers? Because most people haven't had to face, as you say, austerity yet. But when they do, are they likely to abandon the expensive stores and go to the cheap stores? And are the cheap stores going to say, okay, they're all coming to me? The economy then says, I can put up my prices because I've got the volume. I mean, do you see any winners and losers in this?
Well, there's winners and losers in the high street, obviously, as you can see from Brighton and Lewes, any town. You've got Peacocks have closed down, which is a very popular store. A lot of the Debenhams, of course, has gone. The winners are going to. I think what's left is the players that are left, i.e., like Waitrose, like Sainsbury's. They've probably got a hold, and therefore, if they were of a mind, they could actually put prices up. But I think that would be slightly silly because they're making money. They're doing well anyway. They've actually kept prices stable, Keith. So if the big players keep the prices stable, then people's wages keep apace, it's fine. But as you rightly said, the basics of economy is, do I have enough money to buy the goods that I really need today? And that's a key point. So I don't think they're going to hike prices that much. I think that, you can imagine if there was they all got together and said, we're putting 50% on food or drink, you would have riots and complaints, and quite rightly. So they've got to play it safe. But of course, there's less players now, Keith. So when you've got less players, there's more for the players that are left. And they'll do well. It's the same with people like Amazon. And I mean, Amazon has almost cornered markets. And, if others go by the way, they get bigger. And my worry is you don't want to be influenced by huge corporates. It should be, after all, I think my figures are right. 95% of businesses in the UK have 1 to 10 people. You've got to look after those. You can't be a government that selects, we ought to keep Waitrose happy. We ought to keep Poundland. So that's it. I mean, I think talking about Poundland, which I do go to, I think they've got a very good balance because they're one of the first to actually get quality products not made by themselves, and they sell it cheap for £1. So clearly, it's if my homework's right, they are the most successful high street store per capita and profit wise. They are the best store. They make money, but they give a fair deal to people. Hence, they're the most popular store. So the government has to bear that in mind. The government. Honestly, Keith, I come back to our point. I don't know what the figures are. I can guess what's happened with the figures, but as John said, if the government's put billions in to helping everybody, the NHS especially, we've got to really hear what he says in the budget, what his plans are, and then digest the information afterwards. Because honestly, I don't
stack them high, sell them cheap. But let's just go back to the home shopping basket for a moment, because it's something which we do have to take account for. There's been a lot of scandal in the particularly the retail industry at the moment. So you've got shops like Next and so on and so forth being taken over and so on. Now, that doesn't make any difference to me because I don't buy my knickers from Next. I get them on eBay. But the morality, I would have thought, is going to enter into how these stores are handled. When I lecture on other subjects, I often use the scandal of Tesco, where they had 250 million, was it, chunk out of their accounts without them even knowing it lost. And I was really impressed with the way they set about solving that and making sure that the customer, the shareholder, that the market generally didn't suffer. Now that is, to me, morality. I don't go to Tesco, incidentally, but because it's too far away. But that is morality. Do you think that sort of morality extends throughout the retail shopping trade? Because they are going to be key in many ways to helping the revival, I would have thought.
Well, look at the likes of Philip Green, etc. Just as an example, it isn't always as morality as we'd like, Keith. Tesco's are a special. Tesco's was one of my clients in banking, and they were one of the first to get logistics right. They're pretty good. Obviously founded by Nat Cohen. They've been going many years. They've got it right. The likes of Waitrose, Tesco's are sensible, Keith. It's and I think actually I don't know about you. I'm not a wealthy person. I'll Mr. Sunak.
You don't know about me. You know bloody well. I've got pound notes coming out of my ears. Yes.
Actually, all right, I'll ask you a question then. I'll do it as a poll here. I think when I get my food shopping from along the high street in Brighton, it's good value. Whether I go into Sainsbury's, Poundland, or obviously Woolworths has gone, but high street names have gone. But then I think don't you think it's still competitive pricing? Do you feel you're getting a good deal when you shop? No?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that if I walked 2 or 3 100 yards further, I mean, I have reasons for not doing, but if I did that, I would get a much better deal than just popping down the road. I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to that. What I think is, will people abandon the top shop, as it were, and for a better deal, or will they actually sort of struggle along to maintain some semblance of status within society, or the old argument, of course, those goods are much better, and of course, when you look at something like Aldi as opposed to Waitrose, and the wine experts go in and they say, in the main, if you go to Aldi, you get a much better standard of wine than you do from Waitrose, and you pay a third less. But there are a lot of people that aren't convinced by that. Certainly not. I wouldn't go to Aldi. I have my own reason.
Yeah. And yet I know some very wealthy friends of mine from the city whose wives do go to Aldi. So and I think Aldi's a great shop.
Well, I mean, I think the thing it is changing to some extent, but it probably changes in the city faster than it does in the country. We tend to be a bit snobby, in the country. Is it, my dear chap? Did you go down to the county ground this weekend? No, I was playing pebbles in my garden. No, I'm sorry. John makes another point there. 99.9% of businesses in the UK are classified as SMEs. Now, I knew that across the EU, when we were members of the EU, that it was something like 83%. In other words, the small businesses are vitally important to all the economies, but you wouldn't guess it sometimes from the way governments behave.
Well, if we go back, Keith, I've mentioned that already about the SMEs. John's, I think, I wouldn't agree with John's 99.9%. I thought it was 95, 96, but it's exactly what I said before. Small to middle-sized enterprises, it means, is, they're the lifeblood. And John is absolutely right. We talk about all these big corporates, but the lifeblood is the high street and the smaller shop. So do you remember what Napoleon's great comment was? It's a nation of shopkeepers, which we are. and were, yeah. So yeah, John figures are always good. I wish he wouldn't give so many at the moment, but yeah,
well, I mean, as I said, it is like having an analyst for us this morning. I mean, he's cropped up with things which we all need to take account of, and indeed, your 3-point argument has been very, very sound, and everything that he's cropped up or popped up on the screen is you've been able to cover, Paul. So I think that God bless you for the work that you've done, hard work, which will come out this afternoon. A reminder, because it's now 8:30, would you believe? We've gone through our hour very quickly this morning. This afternoon, or at 12:30, we will start our coverage. We don't know what time the Chancellor is going to get to his feet, but we'll come and go with some analysis and so on as things become clear throughout the day, and we'll bring you, particularly if we can analyze what it will mean to, well, in this particular case, SMEs. Lewis and Sussex are full of SMEs, and what the government is going to do to help or hinder those in this budget will be key to this part of the world. So we'll keep a particular eye on that.
By the way,
so
Keith,
Paul, we'll see you later.
Okay.
I look forward to it. And just a reminder that the weather today is sunny intervals and a gentle breeze. 11 degrees is the top thing. Sun from just about now. Well, no, 10 o'clock it's going to start to get sunny, right through till late afternoon, 5 o'clock. I hope that's a typo, John. He's just come through with a hood briefing. I think he thinks that you and I are hoods.
Yeah.
The start of a new mafia.
John's got a right sense of humour. Very good. No, thanks. Keith, I've just got a quick news flash. It's delayed to 1 o'clock, the budget, because he's lunching at Fortnum and Mason's. Is that all right? He'll be late.
Well, if I was him, I would have said his wife.
I'd like her number.
We will see you. We will see you about 12:30, and look forward to it, everybody. An interesting day. Cheers. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye.